In today's video, I'm going to be creating this really cool CSS navbar animation, and this is going to be the very first time I try to solve this, and I'm going to be doing it live, so you can really see my thought process and like what I do when I encounter bugs and issues, and really learn how I go about solving complex problems. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name is Kyle and my job is to simplify the web for you. And as you can see on the right side of my screen, we essentially have an animation of what this is going to look like. This is actually an effect done by the Online Tutorials YouTube channel. I haven't actually watched their video. I've just looked at the very beginning here to see exactly what this is going to look like. And we're going to attempt to create this exact thing on our own. And this is going to be the very first time I try to solve this, so there's going to be lots of mistakes and you can really see through how I go through those different problems. I also just have an image here. This is the thumbnail for the video, and it kind of shows me exactly what this is supposed to look like. Now, the very first thing I did to get started is I just downloaded 5 different images so we can have the 5 images inside of here, so you don't have to watch me download that. Other than that, let's just get started with a blank indexed HTML file, and we're going to open this up right here. There we go. And inside of the body, the very first thing that I want to do when I'm trying to solve this problem is I want to create just the base navbar. So without this, green section right here, I want to create what the normal white navbar would look like before any animations, and then we can add in the more complex part there. The reason I'm doing this is because creating this white kind of navbar is something that I can really easily do. So I want to do that first. I want to get something working and on the screen that is relatively easy for me before tackling the much trickier part of the, this green moving icon. So to do that, let's just create a nav, and we're going to give this nav a class here. And let's just say the class is going to just say navbar container. In this navbar, we're going to have it be an unordered list with a bunch of list items inside of it. And these list items are going to be anchor tags, which we'll just give here the #href just because we don't have them going anywhere right now. And the very first one is going to say home. We're going to bring this down. We're just going to have like count. I don't actually know what he called these in the video, but this is kind of what I think they are based on the icons. So we'll have messages, camera, and we're going to have settings. There we go. So that's kind of like the basis of just the words. As you can see, there's the words, and actually instead of cameras, looks like he used photos for this one. So we'll say photos right there. Make sure this index file is here, and we're going to open this up with live server. It'll open up on the right hand side of our screen. So there we go. We have just our basic page. We of course need a style sheet. So let's link in a style sheet. There we go. Style is CSS. And the very first thing I like to do in all of my style sheets is I like to set up my global styles for box sizing. So I just like to say box sizing, border box, and that just makes it so it's a lot easier to size things. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to come into my body. I'm going to set the background color here to a dark color. So I'll say like 333. That'll give us a dark background color, and we can change our text color here to be white. And then what we need to do is just make it so that our list is styled like this side by side. So we gave this a class here of navbar container. Let's just give our list a class of list so we can style that. We'll come in here, we'll say dot list, and our list is just going to have a background, or I'm sorry, a display of flex. We're going to give it no margin and no padding for now. So we'll say padding and margin is 0. If we come over here, you can see now everything is side by side. And also I want to get my anchor tags. I just want to change the color to be white for now so we can see it. Looks like he used kind of this blackish color, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So now we have white. Also, I want my list style. List style to be none. That'll get rid of all those dots. That looks really good. And we want text decoration to be none. So text decoration, none. There we go. So now we have our links pretty much exactly like we want them. Now the next step is going to be giving them a little bit of spacing and making our actual container have this white coloring on the outside of it. So I think the way that I want to do this is I want to add all of the padding to the actual element itself. Is I think how I want to do this. So if we go back into here, that would be like our LI and our A. So we want our anchor tag to have all the styling. So we're going to get the anchor tags inside of our list. What I want to do is I want to say, hey, we're going to have some padding on here. And this padding, let's just say for now is 1 EM. We'll go back over here. That gives us a lot of space in between these elements. And we also want to make sure our display here is going to be inline block. That way we can actually give them a vertical padding as well. As you can see, without that, they don't have that vertical. While I add that, then I have vertical spacing, which looks really good. Also, we can get our navbar, I believe that's what I called this class. Let's see. Navbar container. And this is going to have that background color, which is white. There we go. Then we can change the color here to be something like 555 maybe. And we'll just do like the same color as the background. There we go. That looks similar to what they have over here. It's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Also, let's change our font while we're at it. We'll just say font family is Arial. There we go. That just looks a little bit better than the Times New Roman default, in my opinion. Now for our navbar container, we want to have a border radius here, and we're just going to say like 1 rem maybe. That's pretty big. Let's do 0.5 rem. There we go. That looks pretty similar to the rounding that they have in there. Maybe a little bit more aggressive, so let's maybe like 0.25. Yeah, we'll do that for now. We can change this as we need to, you know, depending on how things go, we'll change it as we need. And also what I want to do is I want to make it so that the navbar container isn't any bigger than it needs to be. So we can just change the max width here to be the max content. There we go. Now it's not going to be any bigger than it needs to. Another way we could have done this is we could have just said that the display, instead of being block, would be like inline block. I think that'll do the same thing. There we go. And we can also change it so that the margin here is going to be 0 and auto. That'll just center it. I'm sorry. Auto in 0. Actually, let me see here. Let me just inspect this real quick. Navbar container. If I add margin of auto, I would have thought that would have centered it inside the body, because the margin on the left and the right is auto. For some reason it's not. It's probably because I don't have a hard-coded width on this. If I put the width back to max content, and then I add in that margin, we say 0 auto. There we go. That does center it for us. And we'll add margin on the top of like 10 rem, maybe 5 rem. I don't know why that's not showing up. Let me just inspect real quick. See here. Oh, because I have my margin set to auto there. There we go. So now it just spaces it out a little bit. We'll give it a little bit more. We'll say like 10 rem. There we go. That's so it's kind of in the center of our screen, so it's a little bit easier to work with. There we go. That's what we got for that. So this is pretty good so far. Now what we need to do is we just need to make our section bigger. We need to add in our icons, because right now, as you can see, there's supposed to be icons here. So let's add those into our HTML here. So we're going to have our anchor itself, and I think the icon should probably go inside the anchor. Let me just expand this down. We're going to have here our text, which is where we're going to put that home text. And then we're going to have another div for our icon. And the icon here, we could just copy paste the SVG in, depending on what color we want the SVG to be. So we'll just come in here to our home SVG. We'll just copy this SVG and we'll paste it in here. I'm gonna fix some of this. Styling, there we go. And get the div on the new line. And I'm just gonna get rid of the hard-coded width and get rid of the hard-coded fill and the hard-coded height. There we go. Same thing here, get rid of that fill. Actually, no, we'll keep that in there. So let's see how that looks. Okay, we have our house icon, it looks pretty good. And what we can do is we can say, hey, you know what? Inside of our list, our text, I'm sorry, what we want to do is we want to say list, and we want to get the icon, and we can change the fill to have the current color. And that should hopefully change it to be the same color as our text, because current color just defaults to whatever the color is. So that's an easy way to make sure that your icons are always the same color as your text instead of having to copy the color over. And we can also change the size here. Like let's say we want this to be 20 pixels by 20 pixels. Let's see how that looks. Let's do it with EMs. So we can say like 1 EM. This will help it scale off our font size. So if we say 1 EM, it's a little bit small. So we'll say 2. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. That's about the size that I want this to be. Also, this anchor tag element, I'm going to change the display here instead to be flex. And I want the flex direction to be column. And then I think what we can do is we can say justify content center. Let's see, so our anchor tag, inside of it we have the icon and the text here. So I'm trying to get our essentially icon centered in our text. So if we just minimize this a little bit, we can kind of see what we're working with. So we have our icon here, which is inside of our icon and our text, and then the anchor tag should have that justify content center. Let's try align items center. There we go. Okay. I just was swapped which one I needed. I do that a lot when I'm dealing with the column directions. There we go. Align item center. That looks pretty good. Now what we can do is we can kind of copy that over for all of our others, because I think this kind of gives us the default placeholder for what we want, because by default, this text is going to be hidden. So we just, comment out this text for now. This is what it's going to look like. And then the text is going to pop in. And this text I think is a little bit big. It might just be because I'm, really far zoomed in, but we'll just change the text size a little bit smaller. So we'll say .list.text. We'll say font size here is going to be 0.8 EM. So it's just going to shrink down a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good in my opinion. Now what we can do is we can copy over the rest of our SVGs. Now if we save, you can see we have everything showing up just like we want it to. This looks really good in my opinion. And let's just minimize these down so they're a little bit easier to see what's going on inside of our HTML. There we go. We have our 5 different icons and they're all right here. So if we go back into here, I think I want to increase that border radius a bit back to 0.5. I think that looked a little bit more accurate to what we were working with. And this right now looks pretty good. Our icons might honestly be a little bit too large. Change this to like 1.5. Yeah. Maybe that's a little bit more accurate to what they have over here. Honestly, it's a little bit tough to say. It'll be something that we can really easily play around with as we start to size everything to be exactly what we want it to look like. But now I think the next step, since we have this placeholder kind of done, first of all, actually, it looks like we need to add a bunch of padding on the right and left of our navbar. Let's come to our container and we'll say padding is going to be 0 on the top bottom, and the left and right, we're going to do like 2 rem. Yeah, maybe like 1 rem, maybe 1.5. Just to give us some extra space on the side, because as you can see, we have a bunch of extra space on the sides of this, so that way this cool little circle, style here will actually fit inside of it. So now the next thing to work on is the actual circle styling itself. So let's come down and let's work on that. So I'm trying to think of the best way to do that. I think what we can do is we can just add an active class to our, doesn't really matter. We can add it either to the anchor tag or the li element itself. Let's just say that we add it to the anchor tag. No, we'll add it to the list item. Active, there we go. And then we're going to come into our styles and we can say we want to get the active element inside of our list. And let's say that we want to get the icon inside of there. And also I want to make our text by default have a display. I essentially want it to have an opacity of 0 and a pointer events of none. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I can make it so that the text is going to fade in and out whenever we change this to active from inactive, because when it's active, we want to get the text. What I want to do is I want to change the opacity to 1. So as you can see, this one is active, so the opacity is 1. And if we add a transition, so I can say like transition on opacity over like 150 milliseconds, or let's even make it a long animation. We'll say 500 milliseconds, ease in out. Now you can see that the text is going to fade. When I save, you can see it's fading out and it'll fade in when we actually click on something. So that's going to be exactly what we want. And then down here, pointer events, I'm going to set to all. So by pointer events none, we're essentially saying, hey, this cannot be interacted with. And I think we can even set the visibility to hidden. I'm not sure if that'll mess with our animations or not. Let's just say visibility here is visible. And we'll see if that plays around with our animations. We'll remove the active class. Yeah, it doesn't look like you can animate when the visibility is changing. So we'll just put that back to how it was. Okay, there we go. So that's kind of like how our animation is going to work in a nutshell. So what we want to do is we want to take our icon and we want to move it upward and we want to surround it by a green circle. So we can say that we're going to have a background color and we're just going to set this to green for now. That's a really ugly green. Let's just do HSL 150%, 50%. See how that looks. Maybe make it more green. Is that pretty similar, actually? Yeah, that's actually really similar to what he has. So we're just going to go with that. We're going to add a bunch of padding around it, I believe. Yeah, we'll say the padding is going to be like 1 rem. And we'll make sure everything's EM based, so it scales off our font size. Okay, padding is 1 EM. Interesting that our icon disappeared. Not 100% sure why that is. Our SVG is gone. Even though our width and height are set correctly. Padding is 1 EM. Maybe we can change our width here to be like 2 EM, like 4 EM. We can change our height to be 4 EM. So instead of doing it padding based, we can just do it height based. It looks like our SVG is scaling for some reason. Oh, I see the issue. We need to go to our SVG and set the width and height there. So let's get the SVG inside of our icon and we'll set the width and height there. And then here we can use padding. So I can say like padding is 1 rem, 1 EM. There we go. And we can change this width to like 2. Maybe 3. Nope, 2 is good. 2 is good. And then this padding would be like 0.5. Which just happens if we have 0. Okay, so 0.5 gives us something that looks like that. And if we change the border radius to 100%, that'll give us a nice circle. And if we look over here, the circle is somewhat similar. It's maybe slightly different. It actually looks a little bit oval shaped. I want to see exactly why that is. Let's go Yeah, if we hover over our icon is slightly taller than it is wide, it looks like. And I believe the reason for that is because we have some like display inline shenanigans going on. If I change this to display block, I think that'll fix it. Yeah, so display inline is dealing with like when we have the enter key here. So like if we look at our SVG, you can see there's like white space between here. There's white space between here, and that's like getting taken into account a little bit. So if we can change our SVG to a display of block, that'll make it so that it's now a perfect circle. It's an annoying issue you deal with when you deal with like images and other inline elements like SVGs. Now we have our actual circle element. What I want to do is I want to change the position of this element. So I want to say position is going to be relative, and the top is going to be like negative 50%. Actually, I don't even need to change the position. I can just change the transform. We're going to translate this in the y direction, negative 50%. So that'll move it upwards 50%. That looks really good. Trying to think here. I want our text. Let's see how his looks real quick. We'll look over here. So we have this, and then the text just kind of comes up. So the text is almost like a position absolute element. Like it's not actually there, kind of. Let's go into our text, and we're just going to change it to display none for now. There we go. And yeah, it's going to stay display none. Even though it looks like it's still showing up. Let me just kind of look at why the heights are a little off on this navbar. Because as you can see, our navbar is pretty tall. It's because our LI items, well, it might be like the padding we have on them. Yeah, there's extra space on the bottom of our anchor tag. Like our LI is this tall. And then our anchor tag is only filling up that section. So there's extra space on the bottom. And I wonder if that's, yeah, that's from this one. Oh, it's because of our circle that we just created with this icon. Okay. Let me think of the best way to get around it. Because if I remove this translate, you can see that this icon is perfectly centered with the padding around it that it should have. So where did we set our padding? Our padding is on the A element itself. So we can say that we want our list.active anchor tag to have a padding of 0. That should fix the issue potentially. Let's just kind of see what that looks like. So if we look at this element, our anchor tag 48 by 48, and here 64 by 64, it's just because we have no padding on this one. If we change the padding to 0.5, then it should be the exact same size. Like nothing changed, and that's because we added 0.5 padding here and removed 0.5 padding from our overall padding. I kind of feel like this is a bit hacky to do it this way. I wonder if it would be better if we just put our padding of 1 EM on our icon by default. So let's find our icon. We'll say .list.icon padding is going to be 1 EM. And then here, we don't really want to shrink the padding, I don't think, on our icon. Trying to think the best way to do this. What if we just change our padding to 0.75? Or yeah, we'll do 0.5 maybe? No. Let's keep it at 1. I got an idea. And we'll go up to where we have our list, and we'll set a gap of 0.5 EM. And then we can change our padding here to 0.5 EM. There we go. That didn't seem like it worked. Gap not doing anything. It looks like the gap is being taken into account because I've removed the gap to get closer to each other. What if I set the gap to be like 1 EM? That spaces them out a little bit better. Or maybe it's just that our nav bar is not tall enough. Like it needs to be taller. Let's go back. Let's remove this gap. Put in our 1 EM here on our icon. Oops, 1 EM. Because this was about the right ratio of heights, I think. And what we can do here instead is select the SVG maybe. And what we can do, we get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. So we get the SVG. We want to change the padding on that maybe. Essentially, I want to make this circle, but I don't want to make the circle take up space. So maybe the best way to do this would just be to do an after and before element. But I know I'm not going to be able to do that because I need the before and after element for some of these curved related elements here. So some of these curves. I guess I actually should be able to do it. So we can take our icon. We can take the actor element. We can change the content here. It's just an empty string. Position absolute, which means by default our icon needs to be position relative. We can actually put this padding back on our, what was it, on our anchor tag itself. Doesn't really matter where it's at. Okay, after element, position, yep. Now we need our width to be 200% and our height to be 200%. There we go. And we want to transform, we want to translate this in the y direction, -50%. I'm sorry. We want to do this in the x and the y direction, -50%, I believe. Maybe not. If we get rid of that. Okay, that's way down. So maybe we need to do -100%. No. -25%. That seems to be centered. Let's see here. So we do -50%, -75%. Okay, that also seems to be centered. Not 100% sure why this particular translate value is centering it. A little bit strange. Anyway, we can move our translate to our list.active.icon itself. Now we're moving the entire icon, including that after element. And I just want to make the z index on our icon higher. So we'll say like z index 1. The index -1. There we go. Yeah, we don't need the z index there, I don't think. So now our green is showing up in the background, which is good. And here our width can be like 150%. There we go. And for our translates, now we need to tweak these values again. So it'd be like 33, I think, and this would be like 66. Nope. Why is this so difficult? Maybe it'd be 50. 50? Let's just see what we got at 0 and 0. So by default, it's down there for some reason, even with position absolute. And we're making sure that our icon is a position of relative. I guess an easier way to do this would be like top -50%, left -50%, bottom -50%, and right -50%. That's going to be essentially double the size. We don't quite want it to be double the size, so we can change these 50s to 25s, and that'll make it 50% bigger. Does that look big enough? For now, we'll say that that looks big enough. Now, we don't need this translate here anymore. Now, for some reason, when we translate in the y direction -50%, it's not lining up with the top of our container. I believe that's because our padding is no longer on this element. Like our icon doesn't have the padding, our anchor tag does. Let's come back where we used our padding. I'm going to move it onto our icon. Okay, that fixed the issue, but now we have the issue with our icon before and afters being so large. So if we just change this to be, oh man, this is kind of a pain. We could just do, put this back on the anchor tag element. I just essentially want to translate this up high enough. So we could translate it by -50% plus 0.5 EM. Should we calculate that? I'm sorry, minus 0.5 EM. Is it 0.5? That's our padding. Do REM maybe? Essentially, I want to do it by half our, oh no, we need to do it by the full padding amount. So we do 1 EM. There we go, that lines it up perfectly. So we could almost like put that in a CSS variable. We could say nav item padding is 1 EM. Let's make it like 1 REM. There we go. And then where we have that padding set up right here, we could just say var nav item padding. Here we could do a calculation, which is our nav, oops, this times 1.5, so it's going to be 50% larger. And then we can come way down here. We could do that same exact thing. Now we just change it to a CSS variable, so it's a little bit easier for us to actually work with that value. So if we want to change it in the future, for example, we want to change our padding to be 2 REM, everything still works fine. Like this is still in the correct position. There we go. Okay. Now let's think, what do we want to do next? Next thing is probably going to be getting another circle, which we're going to use a before element for. This is going to have our background color, so I'm going to put that in a variable. There we go, and our background color, I believe, is just 333. We can copy this. Our background color, there we go. And this is going to use our background color as well. So this is just essentially another circle, but we want this circle to be a little bit bigger. Essentially, the size of our new circle is going to be slightly bigger. I mean, if we look over here, you can see there's just like a particular size. I think using these percentages was kind of a mistake, though, now that I'm thinking about this. Instead, I just want to do like a hard-coded width and height value, I think. So we could say like width is going to be a calculation, which is 100% plus a particular size. So let's say that we want our thing up here. We could say calc 100% plus, what size do we want this to be? Let's say that we want it to be like 1 rem by default. This is going to be our width and our height. Whoops, height. Now we can just comment this out. We can save, and this whole section I'm going to comment out down here for now. So there we go. Now we have this element, and I want to set our top to 0 and our left to 0. And then we can translate negative 50% in both directions, and that should hopefully dead center this object. Not quite. Let's change this to maybe like 2 rem for our size. Maybe 1.5 rem. There we go. And I'm not 100% sure why this isn't centered. Negative 25% is doing the trick though. I'm curious if that's like scaling based on these numbers. Yeah, now it doesn't look like it's centered anymore. Interesting. This translate should be using the percentage of the size of our element. Do we have these widths hard-coded? Yeah, we have the icon widths hard-coded. Okay, so we want to make our icon width essentially a proportion of the sizing of everything. So I think this is the way we're going to do everything. So we'll just say like icon size is 2 rem. And we want to make it so our nav item padding is just calculation, which is our icon size divided by 2. So that everything is going to be relative to this one size. And all of our everything is going to work off of that. So if we just scroll all the way down here a little ways, we're going to come to our width and height. This is just going to be that icon size. So here we have our icon size for both of these. Then what we can do is we can translate, yeah, negative 50% minus that, that's perfect. The next thing we can do is we can take our width, which is just going to be another calculation, which is going to be our icon size, multiplied by like 1.25, let's say. Let's do that again with our height. There we go. Whoops, looks like I'm messed up my parentheses. There we go, now we have our circle, and I think 1.5 is probably a little bit better, maybe even 2. Sure, we'll go with 2 for now. And then what we can do is we can say that our translate, or actually we can just change our top here to be a calculation which is -1 times our icon size. I believe we can do the same exact thing for our left. That's not quite centered, so we'll do 0.5. There we go, that's dead center. So now no matter what happens to our icon, like if we change this to a 3 and a 3, you know, that's going to be off-centered, I guess. Because I'm trying to think, if our top is always 0. Anyway, okay, this works at least. So this is just in ratio with this. So like since this is 2, this is 0.5. That makes sense. Now we have our circle. That was a lot of work to make this circle, but the nice thing about this is everything is proportional. So like if I change my icon size, everything should scale. So if I change this to be 3, you can see everything is scaling, or 1, everything is scaling proportionally. So I think that's really nice. So we can really easily tweak these values and everything in our application is going to change. Even this border radius, I should probably make scale. So we could say like border radius is going to be a variable, which is just icon size divided by 4. There we go. now I can change this to be border radius. And the reason I'm doing that is because, as you can see here, we have this border radius here, we have this border radius here. So having one variable to define all of those will be really useful. And if I save, nothing changes, which is kind of what we want. Now, pretty much all of our values are defined with those variables, which is really good. So let's uncomment this. Actually, I'm just going to copy everything from here down into here. And what we want to do is we want to make this black circle, which is going to be from our background color. We want to make this circle slightly bigger. So we just want to define essentially a size for our spacing, like this space right here. How large do we want that to be? And we probably just want it to be, again, a ratio of our icon size. So we'll say, what are we going to call this? We're just going to call it icon, not icon. We're going to call it indicator spacing. Let's just copy down a calculation here. We're going to make this essentially 1/8 the size, maybe. We want it to be pretty small, I think. And what we can do is we can come in here. We can say our icon size, all that's going to be the same. We're just going to add in our indicator spacing, which is a variable. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing. Oops, copy this. The same thing right here. And then our top position, we just want to subtract our indicator spacing. We want to subtract it from this side as well. And I believe we want to subtract just half of our indicator spacing. Yeah, so we can just say this whole thing multiplied by 0.5. Not quite. Let me think here. So yeah, plus our indicator spacing. Maybe what we want to do is we want to multiply both of these by 2. So let's just do that. This. And I'm just going to copy this down for our height, so it's exactly the same. There we go. That got our spacing exactly where we want it to be. So as you can see, now I have this spacing around our element, which looks really good. And if I change this background color here to, for example, red, we can kind of see how this works. You can see we just have this red circle around here, but since the color is exactly the same as our background color, you can see that it blends in. One thing that we could do is we could try to just make it so that only the bottom portion of this shows and not the top portion. Trying to think of the best way to go about doing that. We could set the height here to be half, so we could just not multiply this by 2. And then we would need to make it go on the bottom, but then we would need to make the border radius be like correct. That just seems kind of not very enjoyable to work on, so I'm just not going to worry about it. I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter. We'll just put this back to our background color, and maybe I'll think of something along the way. So now we have that done, which looks really good. The next step is we want to make these corners round here, because as you can see in this example, these corners are rounded as it goes about, while here it comes to a hard edge. And the only real way I can think of doing that is just adding some elements that cover up these white sections as the same color as the background. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we'll just use the before and after elements for our, let me think, we don't want to do it for our text. Let's see, we can do it for our actual li element itself. That's probably the best way. So we're going to get the active element. I want to get the before, set the content here to an empty string. And also what I want to do is I'm going to consolidate some of these selectors. We're going to say .list, .active, .icon, before. I want to copy just everything that's going to be the same between these. I want to be right here. So these values are going to be different, but the z-index, position, content, and border radius are all the same between them. So this is all different. So we'll say .list, .active, .icon, after. Whoops. There we go. And here we can get rid of all those same values. So now hopefully, yeah, everything still works the same, but as you can see, all the shared values are right here, which looks really good. Now what we can do is we can do a pretty similar thing here. We want the position to be absolute. And I want to make sure that our list itself, did we call this list? Yeah, we called it active. Okay, so we want to make sure the active element for our list, whoops, there we go, has a position of relative, so we can absolutely position things inside of it. And then what we can do is we're just going to say for now our width is going to be like 20 pixels, height 20 pixels, and our background color is red, just so we can see this. We'll say the z index is 1, so it shows up on top. Okay, there we go. We have our red rectangle. Now I want to position that red rectangle in this top left corner here. Now the easiest way we can do that, I believe, is if we set the left position to a calculation, which is just -1 times our variable for our spacing. There you go. You can see that now it has lined it up, I believe, perfectly with the left-hand side of this indicator. As you can see, it like perfectly lines up right there. So then if I just translate this in the x direction, -100%. Now the right-hand side is going to line up perfectly. And as you can see, now the right-hand side lines up perfectly with that. What I could do is I could say border radius is 100 pixels. That'll give us a perfectly round circle. There we go. We just zoom this in a little bit so we have a little bit easier time working with this. Now what I need to do is I need to essentially add a border on the right-hand side that's going to obscure this right section. So what I can do is I can say border on the top is going to be a particular size. Let's just for now say like 5 pixels solid. And it's going to be the same color as our background color, but for now I'm just going to make it blue so we can see it. I'm going to do the same thing on the right-hand side. There we go. Okay, that looks a little bit wonky. What if I just do the border on one side? Yeah, we'll do the border. Oh, here's our problem. We want the border top right radius. That's the only radius we want. Whoops, top right radius. There we go. Now it gives us kind of this like perfect quarter circle shape, which is what we want. And we can just change this to like 100%, I believe. There we go. That gives us the same effect. And our translate looks like it's having some issues, like it's moved over farther than it should be, I believe, and that might be because of the size of our border. Let me think here. So we translated X. Let's just get rid of this translate for now, put it back to 0%. It looks like it lines up perfectly, and then now we have like extra spacing. Oh no, I don't think we have extra spacing. It's just the fact that this is so curved. So now we need to think of how large we want this item to be, because this width and height, you know, we need it to be based on our normal sizes. What I think I can do is we can just change it to be the same as like our, let's scroll up here, same as our, we have our border radius right here. So let's see what happens if we change it to be the size of our border radius. So say var border radius. How does that compare size-wise? Okay, that looks pretty small. But we'll see, that might be exactly what we need. We're going to change our background color here to be white. We want it to be the same as our nav coloring. And we want our border color here. We want to change this to be the same color as our background. We'll say var background color. Now the size of this, I believe what we can do is we can just make it the size of our indicator spacing. And that hopefully should be large enough. Not quite. I guess we'll just multiply our spacing by 2 then. And we can do this by saying like border width is going to be a calculation, which is this times 2. We can do our border color, our background color, and border display, border type. I never remember what this one's called. Style. There we go. Solid. Let's comment this out. That'll give us a border all the way around the entire thing, I believe. So now this is too big. I believe we need to move it maybe by like 0.5 times our indicator spacing. Change this back to no calculation. Yeah, okay. And we can set our top to be our indicator spacing 0.5 times that. We want this to be negative 0.5 times that. Okay, this is getting close. Minus 0.5. There we go. Then we can change this to our border bottom is none. Border left, none. There we go. You can start to see the beginnings of this rounding. Okay. We just need to make sure our border width is the right size. And that all of our transforming and top and left and everything is the right size. We can get rid of the top left for now. And let's just leave it on there. We can change our border width here to be like 0.25 times that. No, that's not big enough. We change it to 1 times that. It's just really big, too big. 0.5 and it's like almost exactly the size we need. It's just too far to the left, I believe. Let's just like say 0.4 and 0.4. This would be 0.5 still, 0.6. No, that's 0.5. 0.45. This is definitely not the right way to do this. I'm just trying to figure out like what makes it look correct. Like what makes everything line up in the correct spot. I think what we need to do is actually just change our box sizing here to be content box. And this might be like the one time where this is easier to deal with content box sizing. Change these both back to 0.5. Because we know what we want this size to be our border radius. Got our width and the height of a border radius. Let's just for now comment out our border, or change this back to red, I guess, would be easy. So we can see what size this is. And when we comment out our border, nothing should change. I guess things do change a little bit. Let's make sure we keep our border radius, but comment everything else out. There we go. So that's where our element is. And we add a border, it's moving it inward. Let's just get rid of these 0.5s here. This should be just 0 and 0. Oh, I'm sorry. Our left should be our variable, which is our indicator spacing. There we go. And should be a negative version of this. -1 times that. There we go. Now it's lined up in the correct position. Now let's add in our borders and see if this does what we want. Okay, so the adding of the borders is just kind of moving it downward. Yeah, so we need to essentially, let's get rid of that translate. Yeah, that puts it right there. What if we just do our transform and our left is at 0? We'll just say left 0. That lines that up right. And if our top is the negative proportion, this might actually be what we need. I guess these would both have to be 0.5. 0.5. There we go. That looks like it lines up really well. And now we just need to do the same thing with our left. It should be 0.5. Doesn't seem to be. Oh, it's because we have our left of 0 on there. Okay, these values actually look like they're lining up really well. Let's change this back to white. And we're going to change. Actually, we don't need to change our border color. Not quite. We still have that white section, so we need to make our border bigger. And then what we can do is we can change our top to 0. And we need our top to be the size of our border. Okay, I think I understand how this is working now. But it needs to be negative. There we go. We can do the same thing here, but this one would be like negative. This one would just be -1 times that. Get rid of this. We need to translate there, but this can be 0, I think, now. Not quite, actually. 0.1 times it, 0.25, 2. It looks like everything's lining up well. You can see like there's this weird artifacting. That's just because we have like a weird percentage zoom going on. Like when I have it zoomed at 300% or at 200%, it looks fine. Like you don't see that weird artifacting. And overall, I think that curvature looks really good. I don't know why we need 0.2 here though. That just seems really weird. Like I don't like the magicness of that number, you know, like it just seems really odd that, oh, 0.2, like what is this 0.2 corresponding to? I think it partially has to do with this transform here. I get rid of this transform and instead I set the right. Oh, we want to set the right. The right would be like 100% plus. So just be 100%. If we just set the right to 100%, that might actually be what we need. No, still not quite. We'll just put it back to our 0.2 that we had. And it is what it is. I'm not 100% a huge fan of it, but we'll keep it as is. Okay, now we'll do our after. And all we need to change here is, I think we just change this to be right, and this to be positive 100%, and this to be top left, and this to say right. We're just swapping our rights and lefts. Yeah, there we go. Now we have that on that side as well, and that is good. I like how that looks. Now we need to get our text showing up, so that should be as simple as just adding like our text to show up. Right now, I think we just have it display none. Where's our text at? Here we go. Get rid of the display none. I want to make this text a position of absolute, I believe. And we'll say that the bottom is 0. And we want our bottom to just be our padding. So we could say variable padding. Okay, that looks mostly good. We want it to be a little bit smaller than that though. So we'll say like half our padding. Oops, 0.5 times that. There we go, that's in the pretty much the exact space that we want it to be. And then what we can do down here is we can say transform, translate y 0. And up here we can translate our y like 50% down. So now when it becomes active, it should hopefully move up and fade into place. So if we remove the active class, we add it back in, we're not getting any animations. Let's just add some JavaScript so we can really easily toggle between these. So we'll say script, defer this script, and we'll create the script real quick. Script.js, and we'll select our text elements. Or I guess we just need to select our A tags themselves. So we're just going to get all of our A tags. Document.add event listener. Oops, on a click event. If e.target.matches an anchor tag. That means we clicked on one of these anchor tags. We're going to say e.target.classlist.add active. And we also want to take all of our other anchor tags. So document.query selector all anchor tags. For each one of them, I just want to remove the class. So for each element dot class list dot remove active. And we want to put this down below. So now hopefully whenever we click on an A tag, it'll give it the active class. Doesn't look like that's doing what we expect. Let's just make sure no errors in our console. Let's just come in here and we'll say console.log here. See if it's actually logging anything. Nothing is getting logged there. If anything's getting logged there. It is logging there. So for some reason, our target is not matching this A tag selector. Oh, maybe it'd be like target.matches or e.closest. Oops, e.target.closest is an anchor tag. So essentially, if it matches that, or if there is an anchor tag that it's inside of, then we'll run this. Still didn't work. It does look like it's logging here though. So it is running our code and it's removing the active class from it. And we want to get the actual anchor tag itself. We could just say const anchor, or we'll just do a let anchor. I'll say if target matches that, then anchor equals the e.target. Otherwise, otherwise what we'll do is we'll just say that the anchor equals the closest. There we go. And then as long as our anchor is not equal to null, then we're going to run this code. And here we'll say anchor. So all this code essentially is doing is trying to get the actual anchor tag itself to add the class to. There we go. So that is adding the active class, which is what we wanted. Now what I want to do is I want to come in here, remove this active class. I guess we put the active class in the li itself. So we want to get the anchor. We want to get the li. Oh, well, that's fine. I don't think any of our code changes whether or not the active class is on the li or not. I'm just kind of looking through our code. It doesn't look like it. Yeah, so it's fine if the active class goes on our anchor tag. So now for each one of these that I click on, you can see our text is fading in. It's not moving though with our transform. And that's just because we don't have our transition on it. So we'll just transition on everything. There we go. You can kind of see it fade up like that. I like how that looks. Now we need to make our top section move. And I kind of realized that based on how I've designed everything, our top section is going to be a little bit tricky to move just because we've made it so it's an actual element inside of our list. Like each list item has its own circle. And what we want is one circle that moves to the active element instead of each active element being its own circle. Let me think here. What we could, yeah. So I think what we need to do is we kind of need to abstract this out into its own element. So I'm going to go into our styles here and see what we got. So these two sections, and these two sections, and this one. Those 5 sections pretty much encapsulate everything related to this circle, I believe. Yeah. All we need to do is just change that and move it to our list itself, essentially. So let me think here. We have 4 pseudo elements that we're working with. So it'd be a little bit hard to style that with just a single element. So what do our 4 pseudo elements take into account? We have our green circle and our black circle, as well as our 2 edges. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. So what we can do is we can just say that we're going to have our before and after element for our, yeah, we can do it in, we can just add a new element here. And we're just going to say that this is going to be our indicator, and we'll just call this corners. There we go, it's fine. It doesn't have to have anything inside of it because it's purely visual. So now in our styles, what we're going to do is we're going to take our indicator, and our indicator is going to move between the ones that are active. So we don't even really need this active class too much. So our indicator is going to have the before after elements. I'm going to copy this right there. We're going to have our before for it. Dot indicator. If I can spell indicator, there we go. And also this entire section. I'm going to copy it. Replace this with our indicator. There we go. And hopefully, there we go, our indicator is now showing up where we want it. We want to make sure that our nav, our container has a position of relative. There we go. And now we just need to move our indicator to the correct position. So I believe the best way to position this indicator would be if we put it inside of our UL. So we'll put it inside of our list, actually. So we'll say our list is going to have position of relative. There we go. And we're going to make sure that we want our z index of our indicator be 1. We want it to show, let's just get rid of the z index. There we go. It shows up in the correct location without any z index shenanigans. That's good. We need to move it upward a little bit though. So what we can do is we can just say that our, we'll set the top to 0, or we'll set it to like negative 50%. Why does that not move anything? Let me just kind of inspect here. I want to play around with these values. So we have our list and we have our indicator inside of it. Our indicator has no width and height. Okay. Or it has no width. It has a height, it looks like. Interesting. It doesn't really matter what the size of our indicator is, though. We just care about these before and after elements. So we want the top to be like, let's say negative 20 pixels. Does it even move? It doesn't look like it's moving when I set the top. Oh, it's because I'm setting the top down here. Let's remove this 0.5. make it -1. There we go. That puts it in the correct position. And here, -1. Yep. And then this, -1. This should be maybe +1. +0.5. No. 0. Okay, so just no left at all needed. I guess this one does need a left of half of the, I guess, -1 of the indicator. There we go. So now this has put our indicator in the correct location. And the reason why we just had to change some of our top and left values is because it's now relative to our list instead of relative to the actual icon itself. So now what we can do is get rid of all of this code here. We don't need any of that. We don't need that. And we don't need that. We've moved that to this indicator class here. And our icon, we just want to translate up. So that should still work. Yeah, our icon is now in the correct location. And we just want to add a transform on that. So our list active icon, our list icon, transition, 500 milliseconds, ease in out. Now 500 milliseconds is a bit long in my opinion, so we'll change it to like 250 milliseconds for both of our transitions. There we go, I think that looks a little bit better. So now it's kind of moving up into place and the actual text is showing up as well. Okay, so now what we can do is we can make it so that our right and left icons are working as well. So what we need to do is we need to get our, what do we call them? Corners. Dot corners before and dot corners after. So let's just copy all the code inside of here for our before, and then we'll have to do some tweaking, I'm sure, to make it work correctly. What I want to do is I want to just comment this out so we don't have these other corners showing up. There we go. So right now it looks like our left corner is working. I wonder if we just copy this down or copy whatever was in here, the after down as well, if that'll work. Yeah, I didn't think so. So not quite working 100%. Let's inspect our page and see what our corners box looks like. So inside of our list, we have our indicator and we have our corners here. We have the before element and the after element, which is way over there. So let's see where our sizing is coming in. I believe it has to do with our percentages for transform. So for that, no, it's not that. Let's see, width, height. Oh, it's because we're using right here. We just change this to left. And then we just need to kind of tweak how we want this to be. So this would be like 0.8, -0.8, -0.2. No. So if we translate x in the negative direction, nope, positive 200%. That's not what we want. Oh, it'd be like 100% minus -0.2. No, not quite, not quite, not quite. What did we call the size of our container? So we just gave it our icon size times 2. Just copy that. Because we can make the left icon size times 2 minus that. And make that a plus instead. No. Let's just see where it looks like here. Oh, duh. Let's get rid of this transform. There we go. Now it is lined up in the correct space. So all I did here is I'm essentially saying, hey, this right side corner, instead of being able to make it proportional to the size of our icon, because like they were positioned inside of each other, this thing is now positioned inside of our entire navbar. So the right side is way over here on the right side of our navbar. Instead, I said, hey, just make the left side exactly the same as it was before, but just add the entire width of our container onto it, and that'll now put it in the correct position. So now hopefully if we move our entire thing, so if we move our indicator by just saying like indicator left to be 20 pixels, now our entire thing will move to the side. If we change it to like 200 pixels, make sure position this absolutely, you can see that's now moved 200 pixels over to the right. And you know, what we want to do is we just want to move it essentially to different positions. So what we can do is we can say our left is going to be a calculation, which is going to be a variable called position, which we're going to default to 0. We want to multiply it by essentially the sizing here. So we're going to have our icon size times, added on to our spacing, indicator spacing. We want that to be wrapped in parentheses like this. So by default, it's going to show up here. If I change this to 1, it should hopefully move over. Not as far as I would have hoped. And the reasoning for that is because, let me think here. So we want to move it the entirety of our whole thing size, not just the icon size. Let me see here. We call it nav item padding. Yeah, is that what I did down here? Icon size, nav item padding. A little bit closer. It's definitely a little bit closer. It still needs to move over quite a bit more though. I wonder if we do like double this one. There we go. Now if I change this to 2, moved in the right spot. 3, moves in the right spot, and 4. So it's going through all of our different indexes. That's perfect. Okay, so I just had to multiply our item padding by 2 because we have padding essentially on the left and the right of our containers. So we needed to multiply it by 2. That makes sense. So now our icon can move by just changing this position variable here. So what I can do is I can just say this is going to be const anchors, or all anchors is equal to this. There we go. And what I want to do is I want to say all anchors dot index. I need to convert it to an array to do this. Index of this anchor. I believe that should return to us the actual index of the element that we click on. And we can make that active, and we can also change our indicator, which we can just select. We'll just say like data indicator. This is a little bit messy here, but we'll just say const indicator equals document.querySelector data indicator. There we go. And we could say indicator.style. I believe it's just style, right? Style.setProperty. And we call that position. And that's just going to be our index. I think that should work. Let's see. Yeah. Now we just need to make it so that it moves smoothly. So we can come into here. By default, if we don't have a position, we don't want this to be visible, I think. We'll tackle that in a little bit. By default, yeah, we'll keep it at that. Actually, by default, we're just going to make the first one active. And that way we don't have to worry about it. We'll say, yeah, class equals active. Okay. All of these are moving like we want. Now all we need to do is just add a transition on our indicator, and that should be it. Transition, 250 milliseconds, ease in, out. There we go. Now we have that animation completely done. And if I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole of like making the animation individual to each one, this would have come together a little bit quicker. If you want to make the animation like pop upward though for each item instead of sliding across, the way we did it at the beginning of this video would have been perfect for that. And actually one bug I just realized, if you refresh the page, by default the position has no value, so it can't animate. As you can see, it just does that like jump. In order to fix this issue, what we could do is we could just hard code a style here, which is a position of 0. Now if I save and refresh, now you can see that it smoothly animates. And this is just because our default for position is not anything. It's not 0, so it can't animate. But when we default to 0, it can animate between 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Now, if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love my other live CSS solves. They're linked over here. And also the tutorial from Online Tutorials covering this exact magic navigation. That's also going to be linked over here. With that said, thank you very much for watching and have a good day.